Fun fact that most people probably know, but the iconic part from the story isn't actually the opening of the story, as in the short story. I don't know, I kind of expected it was. I Have No Mouth and I'm a Screen is an old point-and-click horror game published in 1995 based on the short story by Harlan Ellison. Despite flopping, it was critically acclaimed at the time and I did enjoy my time playing it, and it has become a cult classic. But is it scary? That's what I want to discover and stuff. Before we get into how spooky it is, let's establish a point. Am, which is going to be annoying to me because my brain reads it as AM, is a supercomputer who has basically become God and gained sentience. He's actually voiced by the author of the original story and helped write this adaptation. Ellison seems like a pretty cool guy. I retract my previous statement. Am has killed all of humanity except for 5 humans and has brought them into the center of the earth to torture them with how much he hates humans. If the word hate was engraved on each nanoangstrom of those hundreds of millions of miles, if the word hate was engraved on each nanoangstrom of those hundreds of millions of miles, it would not equal one billionth of the hate he feels towards humans. Okay, I kind of just wanted to say that. After over a century of torture, he decides to play a game with each of them and sends each one on their own little quest. But for a game, it doesn't really have a setup which could aid in scaring the player, which is me, but that's not necessarily a bad thing, it's just different to the previous game I've covered, Resident Evil. The opening cutscene which conveys this information is genuinely unnerving though. In fact, it lasts quite a while and just lets you think about how awful it must be being tortured for such an incredibly long time. It's really just unthinkable. A lot of the cages are just kind of spooky, even though from the outset they might not be. Nimdok is in a furnace, Ellen is in a cramped yellow box, Gorrister is in a cage that constantly electrocutes him, which is just, it's all kind of just horrid. After such a long time of looking at that torture and hearing Am's voice the scene, it just gets even more unsettling just due to how long you're exposed to it. After the opening exposition, you get to pick one of the 5 characters and do their story. We'll tackle each of these little stories individually, starting with Gorrister. Gorrister's story has a talking dog. The dog is the best character in the game. Anyway, Gorrister's story isn't really that scary. Nothing on the airship itself actually made me nervous or anxious. The scenery is a bit dreary, but nothing was ever really established to make me fearful or anything that would constitute as a scare. Maybe, oh my god, he has a hole in his chest, but no. It's less scary and more intriguing. It gets me wondering, why doesn't he have a heart? And wonder more about what the importance might be. Not, no heart! I did have a little bit of tenseness at the beginning of this section, as it was my first time experiencing the game, but that quickly disappeared as there wasn't really anything that happened which you didn't have direct control over. Part of the reason that Resident Evil was so nerve-wracking to navigate around was because there was some sort of uncontrollable element inside the game. The jump scare wasn't really under your control. Why yes, you did have to pass the trigger point to activate it, but if the dog's chasing you down the hall, the most you can do is run. The dogs, they've got a mind of their own. The fact that you just can't have full control of the situation, and the fact that you didn't know what situation you get into, made it scary. In this game, that doesn't really happen for the most part. Everything is always in your control, which is just sort of a part of the fact that it's a point-and-click adventure game. But it still makes wandering around these areas not that scary. The closest thing to scared in the airship was when I killed the animals in the cages. However, that was more just shock than being fearful. I didn't even feel shocked, like, oh my god, how could they do this? Sort of just felt sad I killed some doggos. I had to redo this as well, and I just didn't want to, because I just really didn't want to kill the animals. It was just an uncomfortable thing I had to do in this game, which, yeah, feels bad. Like, it's good from a horror game angle to make you feel uncomfortable, but it just feels bad. The scariest thing in this chapter is the secret room you get to by flushing the toilet 3 times, which I now just realize is a kind of silly way to get somewhere. Anyway, after flushing the toilet thrice, you get sent to the meat locker, which is just initially a nerve-wracking scene. Oh god. You have 2 people who look just dead on meat hooks, and it just made me really anxious about something. I'm not sure what, but the sight just made me spooked. It was definitely a bit more shocking than scary, but I definitely did have a bit of fear when entering it, despite it dissipating kinda quickly. That was the only true spooky element in all of this though. I think it's telling that I laughed harder putting Glyndis in my inventory than this game made me feel scared, if that makes sense. It's funnier than scary, that's the point I'm trying to get across. Wait! Gorrister's story during this section wasn't that scary or horrific. He basically recovers from his trauma and makes amends with his wife for getting her sent to a psych ward in the probably 19-somethings, which weren't great. I thought he had killed her, honestly. I got the psych ward bit off a Wikipedia article from this game. To be fair, she is a corpse, and it took me a bit to piece together that the psych ward thing must have been the thing that killed her. Overall, Gorrister, while having one scary aspect, just really didn't have anything that made me scared. Now, Ellen is definitely the most tenseful and fearful I got during one of these stories, which is kind of concerning since I didn't even get that scared overall. The story is about confronting a repressed memory of being assaulted by a man in a specific... She got raped. You have a confrontation with a shadowy blob recreation of your assaulter, and this scene is incredibly tense. I was genuinely kind of scared during the scene because I was scared that this M-rated game would show a scene that I would really not want to see. And it's just a nerve-wracking situation anyway. This was generally great at making me feel nervous, until you bob him with the Holy Grail. That kind of looked goofy. Later in the scenario, Ellen also makes one singular remark, which just sent off the warning sirens in my brain.
There's something wrong here.
Her saying that something had changed just made me so incredibly anxious, because I couldn't tell a difference about the room. I didn't notice anything different, so I thought maybe there might be some sort of threat or just something I didn't know. That one phrase is just so ominous, while meaning to hint at something new in the room that's important to find. It was so incredibly effective at making me fearful. It was a, probably unintentional, great use of fear of the unknown. Outside of these two moments, nothing that scary or nerve-wracking really happened in this scenario, but those two things alone were really great and tense and just nerve-wracking moments, which none of the other stories really got to match. Which is great, especially when we get to Benny's story. Benny's story, I really don't feel like it's meant to instill any fear into the player at all. There isn't really anything scary or that horror themed in the scenario. The only thing that might be what's meant to be kinda scary is the concept of sacrifices to a god, which isn't really that scary of a concept, considering it's in Scribblenauts of all things. His story is basically about learning compassion after stabbing a bunch of his fellow men in the military. Despite the gay erasure, it's a nice story with how you're basically just trying to help this outcast boy and after his mother gets sacrificed. And I like how he tries to amend the past the best way he can by showing empathy, which he seemed to lack before. It's really cool, and it can also be inferred that the tribe and all the people you see aren't actual people but robots, seen by the fact that the child's mother turns into a robot rubble after being sacrificed. It's neat how this, along with the previous one, shows how other supercomputers have some input in this future despite M's seemingly total control, which is really neat. Still, the closest thing to a scare is when you cough blood trying to eat an apple. Yeah, terrifying. And there's also when the boy gets taken for sacrifice, which is kinda nerve-wracking, but it's not really in a horror way. It's more of a tenseness of like an oh shoot moment, or like a fight scene in something. I don't know how to describe it. Nimdok's story isn't necessarily a scary story for the most part, just incredibly disturbing. He worked for a science for the Cezanne in Eisen, Germany. You can probably figure out what I mean if you just reverse the letters. Nimdok's arc is about remembering his past and doing as much as possible to redeem himself. A lot of this story is just disturbing. There's an entire operating theater with lots of people watching you, wanting you to remove a child's spine for an experiment and try to basically enable the Cezanne to live eternally, which is just insane. There's also a room full of patients in recovery where they're basically left for dead. Then later, after saving the child, you get another one, which, yeah, this wasn't very fun for me. This is horrific. I don't know much about that time, but if the Germans were really this crazy, Jesus Christ, that is just absolutely terrifying what they did to try and achieve these crazy things. Like, I knew they wanted to eradicate Jewish people and did a lot of horrible stuff, but Christ, what they do in this game is demonic. Despite the incredibly disturbing nature and imagery of the story, doesn't mean it's devoid of scares. To get the best ending in the game, you need to stab one of the fellow experimenters, where in his dying words he calls out for a guard, which made me basically panic, because uh-oh, I might be hunted in this one. That is not good. Would have been nice if that was actually a threat to go along with that. Unfortunately, it turns out that the cry may have just been pointless because the guard outside making sure no one escapes the camp doesn't do anything about you entering the scene. I didn't talk to him though, so maybe something happens there if you do, but it's just underwhelming that the thing that was so nerve-wracking meant absolutely nothing. It's also made goofier later when you realize people watching the operation just don't care you murdered a guy. Like, they're standing right there, surely they can see, right? The music in his story though, I generally don't know what it is, but just puts me on edge. Something about the instrumentation just sends dread into me, and oh my god, it sucks. Like, it's good for horror and tenseness, but I don't know how to explain it. It's like a bad and good oxymoron, okay? Shush. Shush. Nothing else that scary and very interesting really happened though. There was more cool stuff that happened in this section, such as aiding the Jewish people escape the concentration camp and creating a golem and giving it to the Jews. I don't know, I just kinda like that because I recently watched a video on the golem. Yeah. Not very scary, just kinda disturbing. Now Ted. God, Ted's story is the most whatever of all of them. Like, I just don't care because it's technically a romance plot. A type of plot, 9 times out of 10, I couldn't care less about. Like, why not focus more on this fraud thing that Am establishes? I thought that would be something more than he just likes sleeping with people. I might have missed something, but I thought he'd be like a con man or something, or make a fortune of something devious and light his way to the top. It's so frustrating, especially when he's the main character of a short story, which just made me so much less interested in it because of how boring Ted is in this game. Like, God, couldn't you have given the protagonist of your source material anything interesting to do, like play into his paranoia more? It's just, there's nothing. Oh yeah, it's not scary either. Well, okay, that's kind of a lie. I was startled a lot during the story for some reason. Oh, far out. Getting the people in the chapel to appear just startled me for some reason. The devil appearing next to Ellen, who was just here for some reason, like, it's so weird. I did this last, so I already knew that these totally real people are actually robots, but it's incredibly off-putting having one of the other playable characters here, and I'm getting sidetracked again. Anyway, yeah, the supernatural elements in this story aren't really that spooky. Like, am I just meant to find the concept of summoning a demon scary? I really don't. Like, I guess it is, but just having it there and doing nothing with it to make it scary doesn't make me feel scared. Aside from the jumps I was given, which I don't really count as I didn't really feel any fear outside of the initial startle. Ted's section was just not scary. After all the stories, you're sent back to your little torture cage, and in my playthrough, where I may not have followed a guide for like all of it, you're told by Russian and German Am that by using their help and making Am a confused little boy, you can infiltrate the brain of him and actually deactivate him. Anyway, this section. Wow. It isn't scary though. It may have something to do with me rushing through it due to being near the end and having something else to do. But just, there wasn't really any scares or anything along those lines. Like talking with a summoning circle guy from Ted's story, I generally have nothing. This ending is kinda cool, but just, I don't know, it just doesn't have a scare. But is that the point? Is it really the game's goal to be scary in that way? The game doesn't really have any scares, but is that on purpose? Maybe the fear doesn't come from making the player scared of progressing through the game. Maybe the fear comes from how Am is justified in his hatred of people. I mean, will electrocute, rape, mutilate, and betray others. It's frankly scary how awful humanity can be to itself. I expressed how horrifying specifically the experimentation was, but all of these are some form of torture that people inflict on each other. I can't honestly imagine how much pain the other tortures would be, because everything in this game that people have done to each other is just horrible. I have no mouth might not be scary, but the deplorable nature of humanity is.